Okay, well, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. She is Shannon Millsaps, and she serves as the Chief Operating Officer at the Thrive Regional Partnership. And I'm going to just call her on up and leave it at that, and she's going to tell you a whole lot more about that. Thank you.
We're going to find out. Do I need anything? I don't know. Let me stash my water. Hey, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Awesome. I'm Shannon Millsaps. I'm COO of Thrive Regional Partnership. Quick show of hands, anyone in the room heard of or know about or currently partner with Thrive in some capacity? Excellent, excellent, excellent. Good to see you, friends. I'm going to start by setting some expectations for you all, for me. So I am not a transportation expert. I am not a data and research expert. I'm a journalist by trade. So I like to just to sort of set the stage and let folks know how I see things, because ultimately, right, the way that we live our lives, where we're from, what we've done in life, that informs how we move forward in the work we do today. I spent 14 years in local news in Chattanooga and in Asheville, North Carolina. Have an affinity for the Appalachian Mountains, specifically the Southern Appalachians. My family has been in this region for now, I'm the 12th generation. So I sort of see everything through that lens in the world. And so I wanted to just start by saying that. So if you ask me any really hard questions, I might not know the answer, but I might. The good news is that Thrive partners with, and that's what we're going to talk about today, in part is collaboration. I work with a lot of transportation experts, both in the public and private space. It's because of some of those folks that raised their hands that we're able to do the work that we do. So before I get deep into it, I was making notes this morning as some folks were talking, and just some keywords: safety, collaboration, partnership, crash reduction. Crash reduction happens with data-driven approaches underpinned by partnerships. We talked about the critical role of partners. I was sitting back there and leaned over to Michelle, who's on my team. Michelle, raise your hand so everybody can see you. I will not be here tomorrow, but Michelle will be, so please connect. She's our data and research analyst. I leaned over and said, man, they're teeing me up great. I can't wait. So let's talk about Thrive real quick before I get deep into transportation, which is really what you want to hear me talk about. Thrive's mission is to inspire responsible growth. We do that through conversation, connection, and collaboration. You can see the map of our region here in front of you. We are headquartered in Chattanooga, but we work in 16 counties across this footprint. There's 76 municipalities within those 16 counties, 92 heads of government, all with different makeups, methodologies, ideas, dreams, passions. In this region, we have 3 MPOs, or Metropolitan Planning Organizations. Chattanooga calls theirs a TPO. It's still an MPO. So 3 MPOs, 3 RPOs, or COGs. I do a lot of alphabet soup, so I apologize in advance for that. You can tell me later and shame me about that. I'll try to remember not to. But your local development districts, or in Alabama's case, Top of Alabama Regional Council of Government, TARCOG, those are our RPOs, right, charged with doing the rural planning for transportation. Our 3 DOTs, we got a lot going on in this little corner of the world, but we're also, the title of the presentation was Moving Freight Alley Forward. I'm talking with Rhonda and Stephanie and others about this presentation. Chattanooga is what I would call the heart of Freight Alley. We are the confluence, to use a environmental term, of the southeastern supply chain corridor. We have 3 major interstates. 8 of our counties, however, have no interstate access. So when we think about the makeup of our communities, the identity of our communities, there are more than 1 million people living in these 16 counties. And a lot of them are rural. Some are urban, but mostly rural. So how did Thrive get started? Also, I realize I have an hour. I'm going to try not to talk at y'all that long, okay? And if you do have questions, I'll leave time at that for the end, so if you want to jot them down while I'm going. But how did Thrive get started? 2008, Volkswagen is standing with Governor Bredesen at the Hunter Museum in Chattanooga overlooking the Tennessee River and announces that Volkswagen's moving their headquarters, their North American headquarters, to Chattanooga. $2 billion investment, 2,000 jobs. They're up to 5,000 jobs now. Multi-billion-dollar investment, not just from Volkswagen itself, but from tiered suppliers, employees, other development at that industrial site, Enterprise South, again in Chattanooga. What happened then was that several of our community leaders got together and said, we've got to be ready for this growth because it's going to change the makeup of our communities. So they took a trip to Greenville, South Carolina, to Greer, BMW plant, talked to community leaders there about what changed when this massive manufacturing facility came to your area. How did it change? What should we be looking out for? So that was a sort of impetus, right, for Thrive being created, was this idea that we needed to work together as a region because as we grow, things are going to change. So just a quick look at this. We also know that of our 3 states, Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama, our inbound rate is higher than the national average. We're moving a lot of freight. So what we want to do as an organization, as a nonprofit, is to ensure that as we're growing in industry and population, considering the growth challenges that prosperity brings, right? Those are 2 separate images, both Chattanooga. Is everyone familiar with where Chattanooga is for the most part? You've driven through the 2475 split then. You know, we have truck traffic. A lot of it. If you see an image of traffic and it doesn't have trucks in it, it's not Chattanooga. It's just not. But we also know that we need to be able to provide our community leaders with data that supports what we're seeing as the trends. Sorry, that's a little fuzzy. I didn't really realize the screen was going to be this big. But we know that we have 4 of the top 10 truck bottlenecks in the U.S. and 15 out of the top 100 in our Freight Alley mega region, which I'm going to talk about in just a second from an FHWA study. But we, as an organization, want to know that as we're growing in industry and prosperity and population, that we're also preserving our community and the natural character of our region for generations to come. So that's, again, really the heart of our work and how we come at everything through partnership and collaboration. But making sure also that we're taking into account our natural and environmental concerns alongside our transportation and our infrastructure. So why think regionally? This image on your left is a weighted sort of line map of commuter patterns. We are at the heart of Freight Alley. Chattanooga is gig city. We got the fastest internet in the world. If you need 25 gigs, you can get it there. I don't know what you're going to do with it, but you can get it there. You'll see that a lot of our labor shed it helped inform our 16-county footprint. More than 59,000 people are commuting into Hamilton County every day for work. That's just passenger vehicles. Again, not even accounting for all of the freight traffic, right? 59,000 people commuting in every day. On the right side of your screen, you're going to see our Cradle of Southern Appalachia Conservation Blueprint. Because again, we know that as we're layering and supporting communities and making better decisions for our infrastructure, for the safe, efficient movement of freight, we need to make sure that they have all the information they need and that we're also able to layer those environmental priorities with our gray infrastructure, with our built environment. So again, we're looking at these things collectively. It makes Thrive special. These are our 3 impact areas. I won't go deep into detail on that, but know we're working in these spaces, and I'm about to get off my soapbox about Thrive and go deep into transportation with you. But know that we're also working in these spaces, and what we see is the power of the and. We really believe that interconnected strategies are going to be our key to success moving forward for decades. So how did we get started in this transportation thing? Thrive started 2008, 2012, massive fundraising campaign, did a strategic visioning process, 10,000 hours of community interviews. What we heard from people was that transportation was one of their biggest concerns. So we got to work. Out of that planning process, there was a little bit of money left over and not much, but we were able to form Thrive Regional Partnership. So we were able to actually create an entity out of this plan with a little bit of money that's waking up every day thinking about things on a regional scale. So in 2008, early 2008, we convened our Transportation Collaborative. This was a group of freight users, freight-dependent manufacturers, law enforcement, our friends at Federal Highway, FMCSA, our DOTs. Again, public-private partnership. We're thinking across the board and cross-sector. Anyone who could touch the freight zone, let's all get together and figure out what should we be looking at? How do we move forward? So that freight mobility design team came up with the aspiration of embracing our region as a global hub for logistics talent. How are we going to do that? How do we build momentum? We're leveraging our existing infrastructure. We're breaking through boundaries by convening multi-jurisdictional freight, a multi-jurisdictional freight consortium. My friend Dan Palmy at TDOT, if anybody knows Dan, they've heard him say, Dan the freight man, they've heard him say, freight knows no boundaries, right? Your Amazon package, your iPhone doesn't care if it's crossing a state line. It's just trying to get where it's going. And for us, we're publicizing the state of our freight industry across the region and across the country. So out of that process, we developed something that continues to meet, our Freight Mobility Coalition. If you are working at all or in the Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama area or working in this space, I would love to have you a part of this coalition if you are not already. This is a group right now. We are over 45 organizations and entities, a cross-sector, multi-jurisdictional group that, again, is pushing forward this vision and helping us inform communities on how to make better decisions, data-driven decisions. Ultimately, you'll see with the goal there of increasing the easy, efficient, and safe movement of freight and people through the region. So, their meeting, early 2019, TDOT approaches Thrive and says, hey, there's this FHWA opportunity. They want to study mega regions. Could we potentially leverage the coalition that you're already convening and these partnerships and organizations and the trust you've built in community to go after this grant? Can we leverage your framework? Let's do it. And we got it. TDOT was one of 4 awarded this FHWA grant called the National Economic Partnerships Study, the NEP grant. We were one of those 4. You'll see we've got Sun Valley Corridor, Central Plains, I-15, and then Freight Alley, right? And what you'll see there, it's harder to see on that screen, but several of the partners that were involved: Thrive's Freight Mobility Coalition, the Nashville MPO, Knoxville MPO, Atlanta Regional Commission, Birmingham MPO. Thank you if anybody here is from the Birmingham MPO. Thank you for being a part of that. So we started looking at how does freight affect our economy? What is the economic mobility and movement of freight through the region? So in 2019 and 2020, Thrive started convening members of our consortium to study the future of freight flows, partnering with CDM Smith, TDOT, and others, looking specifically at the expansion of key industries and truck parking availability. We talked about truck parking a second ago, right? Truck parking is still a major issue. Here's a couple of those findings. Also, you'll see the mega region there kind of outlined in that map. Nashville to Knoxville, down to Atlanta, over to Birmingham and back, 58 counties included in the mega region, 16, again, counties there at the heart. And this makes it very clear to me. We are right in the center of it. So what did we find in this study? 58 counties, more than 8 million people, 35% population growth from 2000 to 2020. Now that's grown even more. 68% growth to 2040. It's exploding, right? We're growing, 19% here in Alabama. We also found out, and what we already knew, confirmation that freight moves our economy. So looking at some of these numbers, this is just truck-borne freight. And this is from 2018, so we know, right? I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are today. But this study, obviously, we're using data from that time. Alabama, 65% of total freight tonnage originating or terminating in the state, valued at more than $444 billion. There's no doubt. All of the dots on those maps, those are our key industries, our industry clusters that we explored. So you've got aerospace, agri-production and food products, automotive manufacturing, wood flooring and forest products, because in our region is Whitfield County, the city of Dalton, the carpet capital of the world. This carpet, I'm certain, is a Shaw, Mohawk, Boyu, engineered floors something product, and it probably was manufactured in Dalton. So we were looking at that as well as trucking and logistics companies, because we also know that trucking and logistics is a burgeoning industry, specifically in the Chattanooga area. This, at that time, this was based off of travel demand models and FAF4 data. Obviously, I'll talk a little bit about FAF5 in a moment. But the 2015 heavy truck volume corridors, this is, the red lines are more than 7,500 trucks per day. I still use this image because our mayors, it gets attention, right? So we know that we already have that issue on 75 at the 24 split where we've all sat in traffic at some point. But TDOT's working on it. Here's where that was headed by 2040. This is just fast forward, so this is actually greater now. But again, just a 2015, here's what's coming our way and why we have to be looking at data to determine how are these things moving, how can we move them safer and more efficiently. So again, looking at that side by side, we knew, we as an organization, we as a Freight Mobility Coalition knew we've got to be able to arm our communities, our transportation planners, our industry with the information they need to understand how this is happening, why it's happening, and ways that we can potentially mitigate some of this. But again, we're not villainizing any of it. Freight moves our economy. So moving Freight Alley forward, 5.9 million shipping container units passed through the Port of Savannah in 2022. Why are we in our little Northwest Georgia community concerned about what's happening at the Port of Savannah? Because it's all coming our way, right? Georgia Ports Authority opened the Appalachian Regional Port a couple years ago. That's in Crandall, Georgia, which is in Whitfield County in Thrive's footprint. Just to talk about them for a second, that space is a 42-acre site. It's an inland port facility utilizing CSX rail. They have the current capacity to handle 50,000 containers per year at that site, with plans over the next decade to double that capacity, up to 100,000 containers per year, potentially coming our way. And what's happening with a lot of those containers is they're not staying on the rail, right? Georgia Ports is, and I was in a meeting last week with some folks from Georgia Chamber and the Transportation Alliance there, and they're talking about anything we can do to keep those trucks out of 285. Can we keep them out of the loop, right? And if we do that, that's a success. So they're sending them all to the state line, and a lot of those are getting put on trucks and then moving into Tennessee, Alabama, North Carolina, and beyond. So we know as well that we got to figure out how do we increase the opportunities around intermodal transfer. How do we keep that through traffic, this 80%, that through traffic from getting on the roads if it doesn't have to? Can we just keep it on a train and move it somewhere else? So we're engaged in those conversations. But 80% of the freight that moves through, 80% of the freight through traffic, meaning it doesn't start or stop in Chattanooga, that's what we're seeing in our region. So 80% of those trucks are just passing through. 39 million tons of freight per year projected to flow through the Chattanooga urban area alone by 2035. We'll talk about the drastic increase in that and what we now expect in 2050 here in just a moment. But again, a lot of freight moving through our region. So what then? At the end of that NEP study, I'm doing great on time. At the end of that NEP study, there were a lot of recommendations, as there are with studies, federal studies, right? Some of those recommendations included continuing to convene our Freight Mobility Coalition, understanding that partnership and collaboration across state lines, across industry, government, and beyond was critical, and that we needed to keep that up. We also knew that we couldn't support communities with the data they need, especially those communities that don't have an MPO doing transportation planning for them. How do we arm them with the data they need in a way that makes sense, that's usable, visual, not just a chunky spreadsheet with a lot of numbers that I'm digging through trying to find the one thing I need, right? So we approached a private philanthropic investor and set out on a path to develop what is now the Thrive Regional Infrastructure Portal, which I'm now going to share a little bit about with you all and how that process came to be. But first, I knew I can't build this. I said, right, I'm not a transportation expert. Who can I get on my team that can help inform this project and the data sets we should be looking at, the places we should be looking? So we partnered with Georgia Tech. You'll see Cleveland State there. I'm going to talk about that unique relationship. I'll mention quickly that when we put out an RFP to do this project, we got some back. Georgia Tech's was fantastic. The Center for Spatial Planning, Analytics, and Visualization, Tony Giarusso, Georgia Tech is incredible, has been an incredible partner. They do this all the time. Cleveland State Community College, anybody in here familiar with Cleveland State? They're doing awesome work. They're in Bradley County, Tennessee. Cleveland State Community College also submitted a proposal that was nowhere near Georgia Tech, right? So Dr. Squires at Cleveland State tells this story all the time, but I called him up and I said, John, you didn't get it. It was a David and Goliath situation and Georgia Tech won out. But what if we think outside the box and I can convince our funder that we should be working with you and supporting you as well? Would you consider adding a data analytics focus to the current logistics and supply chain management program that you're developing? Can we help you develop that curriculum? He was like, absolutely. You're going to connect me with Georgia Tech? And we're going to be able to benefit from their expertise in developing our curriculum, and we're going to be able to utilize this data to inform research, real-world research in the region? Absolutely, let's do it. So we did it, and I'll tell you a little bit about how that program's doing today towards the end. But I wanted to make sure I had an MPO, a transportation planner, on our core team. I wanted to make sure I had someone who was in the international space, Steam Logistics, a 3PL in Chattanooga, doing incredible work, everything from international, drayage, domestic, all of it. Repower is the gentleman that started, when he started this project, he was at Covenant Logistics and now is at Repower. Repower is a sort of like a Airbnb for your trucking assets. So if anybody wants to know more about that later, I'd be happy to tell you a little bit about what Repower is doing. The Chattanooga Airport, because we know, again, freight is not just moving by truck. We got a lot of air cargo coming in with a FedEx operation at the Chattanooga Airport. And then again, Cleveland State. So I mentioned the airport. I'm talk a lot about the 4 R's in our region and why we're uniquely positioned to be a global leader in this space. But we have access to the river, to the rail, to the runway, and to our roads. All 4 modalities, how we're moving freight, exist right there in our region. So big thanks to those folks. So what were our aspirations? What are we trying to do here? We want a baseline. I want something that I can continue to refer back to and build on and figure out what those trends are. Where should we be getting in front of some things? Increase awareness and academic institution focus. We want our higher ed partners and now even our high school and some middle school partners focused on this. Supporting our regional planning. Again, we wanted to be able to help our MPOs, help our RPOs, help our small towns like Hollywood, Alabama, who's trying to get a truck stop, and now we're able to support them with a data briefing, right, about why truck parking is critical and how many trucks are coming through their area every day. And we wanted to be able to support those communities because, again, that's the heart of what we do, inspiring responsible growth. So providing maps and data, again, in a way that is easy to access and easy to understand and promote a greater understanding of policy. We want to be able ultimately to also go to Nashville, go to Montgomery, go to Atlanta, go to DC, and advocate on behalf of our communities, on behalf of our industries, for better policy in all of these spaces. So we developed the TRIP platform. Its original name was the Greater Chattanooga Freight Hub. That was not a good acronym. Thrive Regional Infrastructure Portal, or TRIP, much better acronym. So we built the platform alongside Georgia Tech and Cleveland State and all those partners I mentioned. This is a geospatial gateway, GIS. I'm also not a GIS expert. I dabble, I know enough to be dangerous. But we wanted them to be able to find the data, interact with the data. I wanted them to be able to add their own data on top of it if they wanted to, and learn about freight movement in the region, again, in a way that's visual and easy to understand. So what all's in there? You can view, download, or stream over 40 data sets. That's actually updated now. We just recently completed an update. We're over 50 data sets now from national, state, and local level providers. We started with public information. Journalist. We started with publicly available information, but how can I take it all and put it in one spot? You can also explore the metadata and additional attribute descriptions. This is a look at what it would look like. I toyed with the idea of doing a live demo for you all, but I don't know that I'll be able to pull that off. But please explore it. You'll see these on it's the first table when you walk in on that side, these TRIP rack cards here. This QR code will take you directly to the platform. But this is like a landing page. It's a URL. It's a website. That's what it is. But it's what the website contains that is where the power lies. So you'll find story maps. Everybody familiar with story maps? Story maps are just a really easy way to digest data, right? It's like almost like reading a blog. For me, it was like, can my grandma read this and understand why commodity flow surveys and freight analysis framework data and congestion and manufacturing facilities, why does all that matter? The 70 miles of truck story map has gotten a lot of hits, right? And we'll be updating this as the data continues, but ultimately on heavy days, trucks that travel the interstate, just the interstates in our region, would span 70 miles if you laid them end to end. I was in Dalton doing a presentation for a board and tried to figure out how many rolls of carpet that was. It was a lot. But we're looking at all of that. So freight analysis framework data, I will mention as I get into some of what this data shows. This is FAF5 data. So that was a 2017 base year. It was published in 2022. I want to give the caveat that what happened in between those times? COVID, right? So the pandemic happened. E-commerce exploded. I just saw this the other day, and I'm curious if anyone in here, did anyone in the pandemic begin to start, like, did anyone just start their Amazon life during COVID? Is that when you signed up to become a Prime member? I was an early adopter. I've been priming for a long time, right? But again, e-commerce happened. There was an explosion in the amount of freight that's moving on our roadways, especially that type of freight. And so we have to consider that when FAF 6 hits the airwaves in a couple of years, we're gonna see that these numbers, even the FAF 5 numbers, are going to be low. Those estimates, I believe those 2022, 2023, 2050 estimates are going to be grossly undervalued, right? They're going to be low because of that explosion in the pandemic and all these things that none of us saw coming. So just as a caveat. There are also interactive maps, right? I, again, wanted there to be a user experience associated with this. How can I go in and start to layer the things that matter to me to help me write my grant, to help me fight my city council and tell them why they need to be looking at a certain thing. For industry to be able to look at these maps and say, I'm routing my drivers this way because. And there are some real life use cases there. I wish I could tell you. I would just say it's a large corporation that does a lot of distribution. But one of their facilities in our region is using the platform today to make sure and to argue that they should not be sending their trucks through Chattanooga, but should be using alternative routes because of safety, because of congestion. That ultimately, yes, it seems to be a less efficient route when you consider fuel, but ultimately it's more efficient in the sense of safety for their drivers. So those interactive maps to be able to actually chart and query and filter and summary, because if you're not a transportation or a GIS expert, you still want to be able to use this thing and understand what it's trying to show you. So what are some of the things that are in the map? On the left here, all of those little dots are freight-dependent manufacturers. On the right, you see that FAF congestion data. So when we begin to layer, where is freight coming from in the region? Where is the congestion? We can really start to paint a more holistic picture about the movement of freight in the region and what the challenges are. Truck parking availability. So that NEP study informed where all of these truck parking facilities are because we aggregated that during that FHWA study. This information is a little harder to update. This is not like I can go out and grab one data set that's going to tell me where all of these are. What is special about this map, when you get in yourself and explore, you'll realize that all of the dots on this map are clickable, interactive. Within, you can see, is that a public parking facility or a private parking facility? Who owns it? Is that a DOT rest area or is that a pilot Flying J? If it is, how many diesel lanes do they have? How many truck parking lanes do they have? Spots do they have? Is there Wi-Fi? Are there showers? What are the amenities? Here's the phone number. Here's the address. Every bit of data that we could snag on those pieces and points, we did, and it's here. So you can see it yourself. Alternative fuel infrastructure. So we just had our freight forum last week. Big thanks to Clay from FMCSA for joining us for that in Ringgold. Talking about alternative fuels. The era of electrification is upon us. Lithium ion is cheaper than it maybe has ever been and therefore is being produced on a much wider scale, which is affecting policy and regulation and the way that we move things. But we wanted to know, where do alternative fuel infrastructure exist currently in the region? So what you're seeing on this map with those points are a filtered look at just electric electric vehicle charging stations. So again, is that a public or a private facility? Can I charge my car there? What type of charger is it? Is it a DC fast charger? Is it something else? Is it Tesla only? Where is it? When can I access it? All of those things. One little anecdotal note, I grew up in North Hamilton County in a town called Soddy Daisy. Anybody familiar with Soddy Daisy? Soddy Daisy High School graduate right here. But that dot in the center, if you kind of go from the cluster in Chattanooga up a little bit, stay in Hamilton County, I was like, there's no way there's a charger there. I grew up there. There's no charger there. There is. It's at the TVA Sequoia nuclear plant. You can't use it. But government can. So again, though, we wanted to know what exists. I will mention, this is just a look at EVs. We're also looking at biodiesel. We're looking at CNG, RNG. We're now toying with the idea of how we can capture hydrogen plants. We're looking at all of those alternative fuel realities and where they currently exist in the region. This is a good map, too, to pause for a moment and share that you'll see in the dark gray, that's the 16-county Thrive footprint. For the purposes of this portal, this study, we wanted to know a little more. So we actually went one county outside of our entire footprint, and all of this data is captured for 35 counties. So even if you're not in the Thrive footprint, but if you're close, it helped us grab Huntsville, and all the incredible growth that's happening there, all the western movement that I just talked about with some other folks into Jackson and DeKalb counties in Alabama. But ultimately, we wanted to know what is happening just outside of our region that's affecting us right inside. And so can we capture that? Now, let's see, I'm gonna see if it's gonna play. I'm gonna play a short video. It's about 2.5 minutes. It'll allow me to stop talking and you to have to stop listening to me. You can listen to somebody else. But if this plays, it's Jake Bearden. He was the representative on our core team from the Greater Dalton MPO. He's since moved on and is now a private consultant. Jake is an incredible community champion, but he's gonna talk, hopefully, a little bit about how he, at the government level, is using the TRIP platform and how it's changed some of the things in his world. Maybe it'll play. I swear I tested it. Oh. There we go.
Transportation planning is data-driven, and it all comes to dollar and cents. The MPO in South Georgia was requesting additional funds to do a freight study specifically targeting trucks and truck traffic on their roadway. Just for their county, they were looking at $150,000. With the TRIP platform, I have that across 35 counties for essentially free. My name is Jake Bearden. I am the Director of Community Development for Whitfield County Board of Commissioners. Within that role, I also serve as the Transportation Planner for the Greater Dalton Metropolitan Planning Area. As a transportation planner for long-term planning, you have to take a step back and not try to treat the symptom, but try to treat what's causing the problem. You really have to have a regional outlook that encompasses more than your area. So as a county employee, TRIP has made a difference in really two ways in my life. One, it's made me a better steward for the county taxpayer dollars. The second way is that not only has it benefited me from a transportation planning standpoint and our long-range future, but our everyday economic development. A specific example of how I've used TRIP in the past year is that we had an intersection realignment at Donville Beaverdale Road and Beaverdale Road. And this intersection received a lot of attention from the engineering department because of a lot of bad accidents occurring here. It moved up on the priority list to get something done. And using the TRIP platform, we were able to show that not only were there accidents occurring here, but there was a high volume of traffic here, and there were a high volume of trucks coming through this intersection as well. Transportation planning is hard and expensive. Having access to the TRIP platform has made my job more efficient and easier. For a local government or a county or a city that does not have an MPO, all transportation planning activities falls back to the state planning department. While the state is very capable and they have a lot of great resources, they're not there every day. They're not seeing what's truly impacting that community. With a platform like TRIP, you can have someone at your local government level take a look at accident data, take a look at how many people are coming in and out of their county every single day that they can then relay back to the state to create a better plan that incorporates their local roads that are undoubtedly being impacted by state routes and interstates. Since the launch of the TRIP platform, I have consistently referred to it as a game changer. And if you're part of the 35 county makeup of the TRIP platform, it is absolutely essential that you use it.
Thanks, Jake. Now it's like, can I get back to the presentation? Yes, I can. All right, so traffic congestion is just going to continue to increase, right? It's just going to keep growing and exploding. Freight weight, also going to continue to increase. This is just a quick look at the sort of the tonnage and the amount of freight weight in 2023 compared to 2050 in yellow there. We know obviously you can see truck is the forecasted to grow the most. We also know, again, just that conversation last week in Georgia, talking about how we're ultimately going to have to double our rail ability because, and I'm sure some of you in your work have seen this, trains are having to run longer, more and more cars, and it's causing blockages and backups. I just had a conversation with an employer in our region who watched a train load of sugar loop them for 26 days. And the answer they got from Norfolk was that they couldn't stop because they had other deliveries, and if they stopped and backed into that spur right there to try to offload, there's only a single track in that area, it would have blocked the track for too long. 26 days for them to get that sugar. They ended up having to go truck in sugar. Now they don't use the rail. They truck everything. They take it by rail to Enterprise South over by Volkswagen, and then they take it by truck the rest of the way to their plant. So like that's only going to continue, right? We know it's going to continue. So truck traffic continuing to grow. Again, this is a look at the entire region. All of this is in the platform. Tonnage and trips. Tonnage is expected to increase. This is just in this intersection too, if you're familiar with Chattanooga. Driving around Moccasin Bend, you're coming off of the merger of US 27 of Interstate 24. You're coming around the bend there. There's a river, a rail, and a mountain. There's really nowhere to expand that roadway unless at some point TDOT plans to do like a flyover lane or something like that out over the river. But that section of road, if you're traveling, on my way home today, I'm gonna do my best to not hit that at 5 o'clock because it'll take me an extra hour to get home just because of this section of roadway, right? Tonnage is gonna increase 78% to more than almost 70,000 K-tons, so 70 million tons of freight. By 2050, truck trips are going to increase by 80%. So we're looking at how do we help prioritize other modalities? Again, how do we as a coalition, as a regional partnership, as a collaborative effort, help our communities and industry and find viable pathways that aren't just our roads, right? Driver fatalities, safety is a big piece of this. We are looking at safety data. I don't have a slide to illustrate this, but if you get into the platform yourself and start to click around, you will notice. And I feel like because we are here, it is something that I just have to, again, put a little asterisk and caveat. We have federal fatal motor vehicle accident data that we get from the feds that is displayed on the map in plot points. You can kind of see an example of that here, those little red dots. Are fatal motor vehicle accidents. All of those little orange X's that's provided by TDOT. We get that from the state of Tennessee as well as the state of Georgia. We do not get plottable data from the state of Alabama to say that. You will notice that when you look at the map. If you were to layer our states, you will see specifically commercial vehicle accidents. Again, you can click that point and see who was at fault, what time of day was it raining, was it not? All of those pieces and parts that are reported from the states up to the feds, they give that to us in a shapefile and we're able to display it on the map. So we're able to show people where large truck accidents are happening, where they're happening in relation to fatal motor vehicle accidents, and where they're happening in relation to congestion and manufacturing facilities, and. So something I hope eventually we can work through, but every state sees the release of that data differently. Worth acknowledging that you will see a blank spot if you're looking specifically for mappable, plottable commercial vehicle accidents in our Alabama counties. That is not there And that's because that's not information right now that we're able to receive in a way that we can publish it. But we're working through that and figuring out other ways that we can continue to support our Alabama counties, even at the local level, by understanding where those accidents are occurring. Safe truck parking, we need it, right? 98% of drivers have trouble. ATRI says drivers spend almost an hour trying to find parking sometimes. This mirrors exactly what we hear from truck drivers in our region. 2025 funding bill is currently sort of in subcommittee that could potentially down the road allocate about $2 million towards truck parking. So keep an eye on the policies and the changes that are happening at the federal level. And I'll wrap up and leave some time for questions here by talking a little bit about partnerships and why it's important. You heard that this morning. We can't do this alone. There is no one answer here for any of these challenges. We have to work together. We have to work across state lines. We have to work as industry and enforcement and regulation and planning and community all together. That's how we find success. So not only do partnerships like ours, like the Freight Mobility Coalition, help do some of these things, attract funding and research and support, but again, partnerships unlock all kinds of funding possibilities. When is the time to have that conversation with someone? Before you need them, right? Thrive's success is built on trust. Our boss, mine and Michelle's boss, and I'm sure other people's bosses, and this phrase has been co-opted a million times, but progress moves at the speed of trust. Trust moves at the speed of relationships. So sometimes it does feel a little funny when we're meeting with the Freight Mobility Coalition and folks there's value in getting in a room like this together, in networking and partnerships and knowing a face and having someone you can call on. It's critical to the work that we're doing. It is the foundation of that. And so simply being in relationship can get you a lot of places, especially when those next opportunities come up. So the time for those partnership considerations and those relationship buildings is like yesterday. So if not yesterday, let's do it today. The partnership with Cleveland State, I want to brag on for just a second. Because this quote from Georgia Tech makes me so happy. That Georgia Tech was able to say that our community college in Bradley County, Tennessee, may have the best blending of a curriculum that they've ever seen for what industry needs today. I love it. So we've had now, I think there's 27 students currently enrolled in that program. Our ultimate goal as an organization is to be able to transfer the maintenance and the continued data updates outside of the Georgia Tech umbrella and to Cleveland State into our region at some point. But we also deeply, deeply value that partnership with Georgia Tech and the work that they've been able to do. Working together works, y'all. Here's just some quick numbers of the way that we've been able to do that. I've got about 10 minutes, and so I'll just kind of leave that. I don't feel like I need to read it at you, but you'll get the slides at the end of this, and so you'll also get my contact information, which I think is also in the program. But there's also my email address and our website if you'd like to take a look. And I will stop now and see if there's anybody that wants to lob a question at me. No, thank you. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I saw that you mentioned the chart of, the port of Savannah. You know, it's one of the largest in the country, obviously. Have you underestimated the problem by not including Charleston, less than 100? I know it's a much smaller port comparatively, but it adds significantly to the throughput of 95 and other areas.
No, I would say that we are actively watching that. We've been watching for even before Savannah exploded. Jacksonville is another good example. Mobile is a great example. We're trying to find opportunities to start to capture how those things are moving into the region. Particularly, I think I lean towards the Appalachian Regional Port as an example because it's right in our backyard. But yes, you're absolutely right that that smaller ports are generating just as much. The Port of Guntersville is pushing a lot of stuff through there, and that's right in our area. So that's a absolutely fantastic point. And yes, I failed to mention that, but we're looking at all that data anywhere that can speak to what is coming. And this is not static. Like, we didn't build this and we're like, there you go. Go have fun, here's a product. We're building on this. We have a data maintenance schedule. We're updating it, data sets everywhere from 6 months to 5 years when it comes to FAF and commodity flow survey. But like, we are going to continue to build and evolve this and add more and more. And there is that, again, that opportunity for a freight broker to lay their brokerage lanes over this if they want. And when they do that, it doesn't go public. It's just in their instance, but we've given them the base. Thank you. Yeah.
With that map of the charging infrastructure, do you know how many of those are capable of charging the medium or heavy duty truck?
0. Yeah.
I assumed as much, but I was just curious.
Yeah, I mean, and ultimately, right, when some of the conversation at our freight forum last week was around what is battery electric truck really the next best solution for industry? Is it CNG, RNG, hydrogen, some other opportunities that are at least like viable and ready today? But I would acknowledge too that there's a lot of concern around megawatt charging and what that can mean. We're starting to see accidents on roadways, right? We think about safety, and when you have a big battery and it's burning in a truck, it really complicates things for the local responders on the ground. So we've got to be considerate, I think, too, of what are those most viable options. And what I'm hearing from industry is that they're really more focused on CNG hydrogen as immediate opportunities for a quicker return on investment than battery. But 0. There are Covenant. I'll say there is one. Covenant does have a charging facility. They do have a Nikola truck. One that's doing short hops right now for a client down in Atlanta. But obviously that's just the one and it's private. So. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, I will close with saying, with repeating a question that I got in San Diego at the Esri User Conference several weeks ago when I was presenting about the TRIP platform, and a gentleman raised his hand and said, "You're talking about collaborations and partnerships, like all of this is easy, right? Like, it's easy. Is it easy?" No, it's not easy. It's not easy. What you're seeing, at least with our organization, is more than a decade's worth of work. And like I said, it's back to being on the ground, in the room, making phone calls. I go to all the MPO meetings. Whether I now have a role, well, Michelle's taken some of that over for me, but I now have a space on the agenda at the Dalton MPO meeting. They see me as a local update, and we're able to share with them then how we can better support them and be a resource, and ultimately rely on them to tell us where should we be looking. Right? So none of this is easy. I don't mean to make it sound like it's easy, but it is easy to have a conversation and network in this room and leverage the power of being here in this place together and finding ways that you can start to work together. And so with that, I will say thank you. Excellent.